Meet Thomas and his trusty new friends at the Sodor Construction Company for lots of action-packed new adventures. Join Jack the Digger, Alfie the Excavator, Kelly the Crane, and loads of other great new characters as they work hard and play hard under the watchful eye of Miss Jenny, who's always there to make sure her machines do a job spot on. Jack and the Sodor Construction Company, also known as Jack in the Pack, is a spin-off miniseries of Thomas and Friends devised by Phil Ferrell. All 13 episodes were directed by Steve Asquith. Michael Angeles narrated the UK dub, Michael Brandon the US dub, and Robert Hartshorn composed the soundtrack. Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell did compose some music for Jack and the Sodor Construction Company, but it was dropped and never used. According to Phil Ferrell, the concept of the series came out of a meeting with Ghislaine's marketing people in New York, as they wanted to make a companion series that would appeal to a higher age group, specifically the 6 to 8 year old bracket. They liked toys that they could push and pull, load and unload, so Phil Ferrell suggested they use heavy construction vehicles. Plans for the spin-off series being standalone were scrapped when Hit Entertainment took over Ghislaine in 2002. Hit originally wanted to cancel the spin-off outright due to the comparisons with another show, Bob the Builder, which Hit Entertainment already owned. However, Phil Ferrell managed to convince Hit Entertainment to let them film and produce 13 of the 26 planned episodes. As it was now becoming a mini-series which was a companion to Thomas and Friends, stories were rewritten to include some of the main characters, such as Thomas and Percy. Filming lasted from 2002 to 2003, with it being filmed alongside the 7th season of Thomas and Friends. The 13 episodes were filmed, however they didn't finish the other 13 episodes due to it being too expensive to run. There were several new characters that were introduced in Jack and the Sodor Construction Company. In the original backdoor pilot in season 6, we met Jack, Alfie, Oliver the Excavator, Max, Kelly, Byron, Ned, and Isabella. The miniseries introduced us to Max's twin brother Monty, Nelson, Buster, and Patrick the Cement Mixer. And we had one main human character, Miss Jenny, who ran the Sodor Construction Company. So there was quite a lot of things going on in this series. When I first watched the backdoor pilot, when I watched season 6, I had the same reaction to that as I had when I watched the narrow gauge engine episodes of season 4 when I was a kid. It took me aback that we were introducing new elements and new characters to this already established world. And I didn't like it at first. I was quite resistant to the change. But then as I got older and time went on a bit, I became interested in seeing this spin-off series, trying to figure out how it would incorporate the roads rather than the rails. And I gotta say, over the years, I have really warmed up to this miniseries. Where once I didn't like the fact it was expanding the world of Sodor, now I find that the most fascinating part of it. Seeing what these characters get up to, and they have very little to no connection to the railway. They have the obvious connections because sometimes engines are required to transport them to sites where roads can't get them to, and it's usually Thomas and Percy. This was because they had 2 larger scale models of Thomas and Percy that they could use. I liked seeing how the characters developed in such a short space of time in this mini season. It was really refreshing. Their dynamics were strong. They weren't cookie cutter and pandering to kids. They all had their own unique personalities. Some of them were flawed, which is what I really liked, because it gives you more insight into character development. Overall, I found this series very charming, and I'm now really sad that they didn't continue Jack and the Sodor Construction Company, because I think there was so much potential with it. I'm going to get right into my ranking list, and I'm going to rank the 13 episodes of Jack and the Sodor Construction Company. I'm not including the backdoor pilot because I've already talked about that in my season 6 ranking review. And if you want to find out what I thought of those episodes, you can go back and check them out. But once again, these are all my own personal opinions. Your list will be different than mine. And that's the one thing that makes the Thomas fandom so unique. And let me know in the comments how you would rank Jack and the Sodor Construction Company. All I ask is that you be respectful, and above all, enjoy the video. Okay, let's dive in. Number 13, A Visit from Thomas, or Oliver Saurus, to give it its original title. Written by Paul Dawson, whilst digging the foundations for a new school, Oliver the Excavator unearths a dinosaur skeleton. I'm going to give both the official titles of the episodes and the original titles of the episodes, because that's one thing I didn't like, that they thrust Thomas and Percy into titles of episodes where they had little to no involvement. I prefer the original titles. I think it gave them a uniqueness. But given what I said previously about how they weren't really aiming for it being a detached series anymore, I understand why they did it. It was to establish that this was the Thomas universe. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. The episode itself, the main thing I don't like is the human character scientists. Those guys are bloody terrifying. The shape of their heads, those weird kind of red eyes that they've got, that is nightmare fuel for adults, let alone the 6 to 8 year old market that they were trying to tap into. In terms of the story, I felt that it kind of dragged a little bit. I know it was probably meant to be a bit more of a slower pace, but there's a difference between the pacing of an episode being slow and the episode feeling like it's dragging on. And this one kind of felt like it was dragging on for me. Interesting find with the dinosaur. I think that kind of skewed into real kiddie territory. That we're finding a dinosaur, because kids like dinosaurs. It's still better than a lot of episodes of Thomas and Friends, especially later seasons, but I wasn't the biggest fan of this one. Number 12, Jack Owns Up. Written by Paul Larson, Jack knocks over some roofing slate. When Ned is blamed for the accident, will Jack do the right thing and own up to save his friend? This is an okay episode. I like that Jack took responsibility for his actions and got punished as a result. You didn't often see that as we were going into later seasons of Thomas and Friends. I think the thing that annoys me about it the most is that I would have loved to have seen a resolution to this story. Seeing Jack trying to regain the good graces of Miss Jenny rather than it just being done and then we carry on to the next episode like nothing happened. But episodes were becoming more insular at this point in time. They were just meant to be wrapped up in a nice little bow within the 4.5 minutes. The plot has been used a lot in this show in particular, but overall, not too bad. Number 11, Percy's Scary Tale, or Scaredy Scaredy. Written by Jonathan Truman, Kelly tells a scary story about a one-eyed truck. Max and Monty tease everyone about it, but end up looking silly. While the nighttime scenes are no David Mitton, I'm very impressed with how well Steve Asquith done. The spooky episodes were definitely a standout of Thomas and Friends. Ones that gave people nightmares, right into their adulthood. And they really did try their best with this. But this episode is a prime example of one of the main Thomas engines being included in the title and having absolutely nothing to do with the story. And in this case, it's my favourite character of Percy. I love seeing Percy in this season, but he didn't need his title front and centre. The story is really good, but you do notice that lack of spook factor that was becoming apparent as the seasons went on. Number 10, Thomas and the Moles, or Buster 1, Moles 0. Written by Jan Needle. Buster feels left out when he does not have any jobs to do. However, Miss Jenny discovers molehills on a field and calls Buster to flatten the molehills. The character of Buster is cookie cutter George the Steamroller. I think it annoys me more because George the Steamroller was meant to be coming back in this season, and I would have loved to have seen how George interacted with the Sodor Construction Company. The amount of chaos he could have caused, the manipulation of the younger characters such as Jack and Alfie. So many great stories they could have wrote with this. But they brought in a generic nice guy steamroller in Buster. But I do like Buster's design, and the episode itself was actually quite amusing. I know in my previous reviews of this episode I didn't like the fact that the mole spoke. I stand by that, because that takes out the realism of what the main show was trying to achieve. And if you're targeting this for an older age group, those kids aren't stupid. They'll know that moles don't talk. Having them in the scarves and the hat was quite whimsical though. And I did like that ending sequence with Buster flattening all the molehills. So while I'm still not the biggest fan of it, I have warmed up to this episode. And I've warmed up a bit to the character of Buster as well. Number 9, The Tortoise and the Hare. Written by Will Ing, Max and Monty tease Buster about being slow and challenge him to a race. This is the episode that I like Buster a bit more in. I know the story is just a rehash of The Tortoise and the Hare, but it still has a good message to send to children. Slow and steady does win the race. You have to take your time and do a job properly, rather than rush it. I know this with my own kids now. I'm constantly trying to tell them to slow down because everything for them is going fast. I like the dynamic of Max and Monty. They're more older twins that maybe have more of a strained relationship, quite competitive nature. So I'll never show it to my kids in case they turn out like them. And I do like that Buster got his little win. Again, this could have been such an interesting dynamic if George had a one-on-one race with Buster. Maybe Buster introduced in this episode as the good guy steamroller and them going head to head. I think that would have been really interesting and a lot of fun with the dynamic. Number 8, A Tale for Thomas, or The Lightning Tree. Written by Paul Larson, the pack are repairing the lightning tree in Maithwaite Forest when Max and Monty run into it. The tree is about to collapse, but can Jack, Alfie, Kelly, and Oliver save it? The answer is yes. I didn't think it would take 4 vehicles to be able to hold up a tree. Clearly, I am wrong. And I did like the model work done on that lightning tree, being able to put a good lightning bolt shaped scar on it. It looked quite cool. The story may be a simple premise, but what I really liked about it is that there was really good execution. And Max and Monty are absolute flight risks. And them getting scolded at the end is always fun to see. Number 7, A Happy Day for Percy, or Byron Saves the Day. Written by Paul Larson, Byron the bulldozer is tired of being ignored. He is later the centre of attention when he has to save Alfie. That's the part of the story that I liked the most, the rescue of Alfie. That's the type of tension and drama that I loved from the classic era of Thomas and Friends, where you didn't necessarily know how things were going to go down. I particularly liked the score from Robert Hartshorn in this. The intense music that he used was really well done. And I like when they have the darker, cloudier days where mud and adverse weather conditions can come into play. These were the parts of the miniseries that I liked, when they experimented with how they went about things. The well done chorus at the end was a little bit cheesy, but the story was strong, the rescue scene hit in all the right spots. Good job. Number 6, Percy Helps Out, or Nelson Gets Carried Away. Written by Brian Truman, Nelson is tired of his job of always having to carry the other machines, and dreams to be carried himself. Nelson's an interesting character. Don't really know too much about him throughout the season, because you've only got 13 episodes, but you understand that he is a unit. Strong guy, able to carry not only steamrollers and bulldozers, but in this episode you find that he's able to carry a steam engine. I did find it quite funny when they got Thomas onto his flatbed and he only had the 5 wheels, so you were thinking he's going to topple. Kind of reminded me a bit of when Thomas went to the Great Railway Show in the Railway series book by Christopher Audrey, and they're having to transport him by road. And the resolution of Nelson finally getting to be carried and given a ride rather than being the ride, phrasing, was really nice. Number 5, Thomas's Trusty Friends, or Another Fine Mess. Written by Paul Larson, Ned is disappointed when Oliver is given the chance to demolish buildings. Okay, the demolishing sequence when Ned knocks the chimney down and lands on those sheds was brilliant. That is a crash worthy of OG classic series Thomas and Friends. You can tell this was their make or break crash. We get one shot at this, we need to nail it. And boy, did they nail it. And I love that it was Ned that's done it. He's a bit of a dumbass, but a nice dumbass. One that you can tell gets in trouble and causes demolition and accidents. And he was just looking forward to being the one who could actually do the demolishing and get away with it for a change. I did like the fact that they kept giving Oliver the bigger wrecking ball, and then a bigger wrecking ball, and he still couldn't knock that wall down. But I gotta ask, what was that wall reinforced with? Adamantium? That wall was not for coming down, and it should have came down at least in the second try. Good story, solid execution of all the scenes that needed to be done. I was impressed. Number 4, Kelly's Windy Day, or 5 Easy Pieces. Written by Phil Ferrell, Kelly is blown over by strong winds which make him nervous of working in windy conditions. Can he face up to his fear in order to save Isabella? Once again, the answer is yes. Now, this is the only exception to my rule about the titles of the episodes. Kelly's Windy Day sounds better than 5 Easy Pieces. I don't understand why that would have that title. Kelly's Windy Day makes more sense to me. But that said, this episode is really good. That entire scene where Kelly's trying to save Isabella is really suspenseful. There's great use of wind effects. The score is once again on point. The direction is really solid. Kelly as a main character is really good. But this was a really intricate episode full of great set pieces. It's one that made me sit up in my seat and take notice. Number 3, On Site with Thomas. or Who's the Boss? Written by Will Ing, the pack, except Jack and Alfie, all argue over whose job is more important, including Patrick the cement mixer, who ends up face first in his own concrete. Like, Patrick is an ass. But what I like about this episode is that they're all asses. They're all bickering over who is the most important out of the pack, and it's causing everything to hit the fan. Yes, the moral at the end of you're all part of a team, so you're all important, is quite a generic one, but it's an important one. It's one that I wish most workplaces would learn. And it really shows a workplace dynamic at its purest form. Sometimes you won't get on with your colleagues. Sometimes you will think you're superior to them if you can do a task better than they can. Or you think your job is the most important because without your job, the other parts of the job won't work. But all the parts of the job are important, otherwise the job doesn't get done. Patrick crashing into his cement was a really well executed scene, but I enjoyed this episode a lot more than I thought I would. Number 2, Mud, Glorious Mud. Written by Jonathan Truman, the machines run out of fuel, so Isabella is sent to pick up some more. She does not like getting dirty, but is forced to go through muddy paddocks. We get a cameo shot of Trevor the traction engine in a shed, and it makes me gutted that he was not used in this miniseries, because he's a perfect character to be introduced. I mean, in fairness, there's loads of characters that could have been introduced from the previous seasons of Thomas and Friends that would have done well in this season. One that I think would have been really great would have been Elizabeth. I would have loved to have seen the pairing of Elizabeth and Isabella. They're both Sentinel lorries, but they have such different personalities. It would have been great to see how they would have interacted, what their dynamic would have been like. Would Elizabeth still have tried to be the older figure, even though technically her and Isabella are both the same age? And speaking of Isabella, I liked her character journey in this. You think that she's prissy and uptight because she doesn't want to get dirty. She wants to be clean. But there's nothing wrong with wanting to be proud of your appearance. But when push comes to shove, and they all run out of diesel and they can't do any of the work, she goes through all the muddy puddles, through the muddy fields, does everything that she can to make sure that she can get the fuel for her colleagues and they can all get back to work. This is what I loved about Thomas and Friends and the Railway series. Character building. And they did it so well for Isabella in this episode. You saw a different side to her and learned that you shouldn't judge this particular book by its cover. And the number 1 episode of Jack and the Sodor Construction Company is Alfie Has Kittens. Written by Abby Grant, Alfie is depressed when the other machines tease him for being small. However, he learns that being small can be very useful. This is the only episode of this mini-series, for the episodes that went out, that Abby Grant had a writing credit for. And I got to say, she really pulled it out of the bag with this one. I know that she gets a bit of flack for that infamous Thomas and Friends Bible, but based on this episode, I can understand why she was given the job. She really seemed to know about character developments and dynamics. She created a really solid episode with a great message, not to underestimate the little guy. I really took to Alfie as a character because he's that underdog character you want to root for. And there was kittens in this. Alfie saving kittens. What's not to like about saving kittens? Kittens are adorbs, even when they're little models. And that entire scene where he rescues those kittens, the building's coming down around him and you don't know if he's going to make it out okay. Because they already established in the backdoor pilot that sometimes these little construction vehicles don't turn out okay, but he manages to, and puts his own safety at risk to save the mama cat and her kittens. And everybody gains a bit more respect for Alfie as a result. This episode showed the true core of a Thomas and Friends series. The little engines, or in this case, the little excavator, can do amazing things. That's my ranking video of Jack and the Sodor Construction Company. Now, for anybody wondering why I've not covered the cancelled episodes, it's purely because they weren't made. And maybe one day I'll do a separate video covering them. But I wanted to purely cover all the episodes of Jack and the Sodor Construction Company that we had available to us. Let me know in the comments how you would rank this mini-series. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep on chugging.